Hello and welcome to another edition of the CFB Super Show. I'm your host, Walter Waddell, aka Dub Deuces 85, rolling solo once again. As I mentioned, my co-host Jake Kucheck, he is busy tonight. He's got a young child at home. Now I know what that's like. He's got a pregnant wife at home. I thankfully don't know what that's like anymore. Although I do have a 5-month-old son, so I do know what it's like, but I don't have to experience it. But he's not available. I'm working on a guest host for tomorrow. Obviously, tomorrow night I'll be back. Same time, 8:30 PST, to break down the Saturday main slate. I am back today to cover the 8-game slate over on DraftKings from a DFS perspective, 6-game slate on FanDuel. I'll also be talking about Prizepicks. That's our grind. We do that all the time. And then any betting stuff that I see. I do want to bring up, before I delve in any deeper, the Illinois line. Yesterday I talked about a +3 versus Indiana. Hopefully you guys got a chance to hit that. It is now down. I mentioned I felt like it would be a pick 'em by game time. It's +1.5 for Illinois now. So I feel like that is definitely going to be closer to that pick 'em status by the time game starts. Illinois +3, if you got it, you're feeling great. I have been just hyper focused on the dissecting this slate. I also had to take time tonight to go to my daughter's orientation at kindergarten. I have another daughter, another kid. They're everywhere. So I haven't really delved into or dealt with today's slate, nor reaped the benefits or really know anything about what's going on with it. So I want to keep this to tomorrow's slate / today, depending on when you're watching it. And then when I'm done, I'll mosey on over the Discord and see what kind of tilting and fantasy goodness we've gotten to experience today. Hopefully some of you have smashed. I just didn't have time to grind the slate past the first half an hour because of kids and delving into this slate for Friday night. So we are going to go game by game as we typically do. If you're watching live, thank you very much. I much appreciate it. Please hit that like button while you're watching, or if you're watching on demand, please hit the like button as well. It helps the show get seen. It helps it go up into the algorithm and push the FTN channel back even further to many people to see. Also, I would highly recommend at this point, if you're not a sub yet, to get over to ftndaily.com. Use my code DUB, DUB, gets yourself 20% off your monthly amount, or if you pay annually and you want to pay that entire amount for the year, you get 20% off that bulk amount. The monthly amount is not going to be something that we continue to do. The discount on monthly, I should say, that's going to be a grandfathered in type of thing. You don't want to miss out on that. So if you are thinking about it, you want to get that within the next couple of weeks so that you don't miss out and you're able to get that 20% off discount each and every month. Not only will you get access to my college sports stuff, which includes, every slate breakdown, Prizepicks breakdowns, cheat sheets, exposures, Discord talk, news, show behind the paywall shows, betting information, just everything that you could possibly need, projections within the NFL, NBA, MLB, all that stuff, niche sports, pro sports, big sports, little sports, everything that you could possibly need under that diamond umbrella. I know a lot of you have asked me about some of the niche packages or other stuff. At the current moment, we just have the diamond package, but maybe the powers that be will be looking to run some specials on some of this niche stuff coming up. But the show goes on. Also, please make sure that you're checking in. You have notifications turned on Twitter on my account. I know I talk a lot about WNBA, Star Wars, Rick and Morty, and some of this other stuff, but I do retweet injury stuff as I see it happen, depth chart changes. We had earlier today, a few hours before lock, there was the talk for Oklahoma State that Jaden Bray, and Don Richardson might be out, couldn't be confirmed. And then, an hour or two later, we get the news that Jaden Bray is out. Don Richardson's playing. A lot of us were able to pivot over to John Paul from Oklahoma State for 3K. And I know he caught an early touchdown. I haven't, like I said, been following the slate to know what's happened beyond the first quarter of that game. But just have those notifications on, get over to Discord, make sure you're checking news. I do tag the Discord as well to make sure that when breaking news happens, you'll get a notification for that. It's especially handy when college basketball season comes around. But Let's move on, talk about the slate. If you have questions, comments, concerns, and you're watching live and you want to talk about it, please feel free to, post those comments. I will answer those as we go. And I like interacting with you guys. It's a fun thing for me to do. All right. This slate, let me say, it's a little more manageable than the midweek 11 game slate, which was very, very arduous, but fun to go through. But this is a manageable 8-game slate. The games on it are a little bit, for lack of a better term, rancid. There are some definitive good games to target for DFS purposes, but there's some games where it's like, wow, this Friday night, the schedule makers couldn't have done a little bit better, giving us, some more, I guess, enthralling games to look at. But alas, we have it. We have a big slate on Saturday, multiple slates on Saturday. So this is the chance to really kind of go into it, make some money here on Friday via DFS betting and Prizepicks, and then hit that Saturday, the running. Now, of course, we have a game on Sunday and a game on Monday as well. 5 straight days of college football here in week 1. We'll have a showdown breakdown for both Sunday and Monday. No shows for those ones. Not really necessary. But it will be a show tomorrow night to cover that Saturday main slate. And then I will also be back Saturday morning, 8 a.m. Yeah, 8 a.m. I had to think about that for a second. PST, to talk about any late changes for the main slate with my thoughts, which I know it's going to be kind of weird this week because I'm going to be talking to you Friday night, and I'm going to come back Saturday morning. But I'll be probably pulling an all-nighter. And then, any injury news that happens, you'll get a chance to ask me questions. I'll get a chance to highlight core plays and really just generally interact with you. Last Saturday, we had a really good turnout, lots of interactions, lots of questions, lots of comments, lots of just general conversation, which I think is really important and a good way to build not only the show and myself, but the community as a whole, because that's what's really important to me at the end of the day. All right, first game on the slate here is Virginia Tech versus Old Dominion. This is one of the games that happens to be interesting to me, not only from a DFS standpoint, but also just from watching it, because I do think this is going to be one of the better games on the slate in terms of competitiveness and both sides having some fantasy goodness. On Virginia Tech, they are going to be running Grant Wells at quarterback. He is the transfer from Marshall. Threw for over 3,500 passing yards, 16 touchdowns to 13 interceptions last year, 7 rushing touchdowns. Not really the best year from Grant Wells. He showed sometimes he's, early season had some games where he threw for, 250, 300 yards and 3 to 4 touchdowns. And you thought, wow, this guy really has it put together. And then he would come out and, throw 3 picks and 150 yards and really not get it together. So I will be interested to see how that works out. They do have Jason Brown as their main backup. It's been around the block. Jason Brown has, and I think the leash on Grant Wells sounds like it's going to be relatively short. Jason Brown, of course, was at South Carolina last year. Before that, I believe he played for some Ivy League schools. He had some spot starts during 7 games, threw for 721 yards, 8 touchdowns, and 6 INTs. Won a couple games with the Gamecocks, and that really kind of nice season for them, considering the talent they had on the team. So he's there waiting in the wings if Grant Wells should falter. Not the best for a guy who maybe lacks confidence to know that, he's got to look over his shoulder. So I am kind of leery about using Wells in my main lineup, but he's definitely in play. At running back, Malachi Thomas, who is their top incumbent returner, is out with an injury. 440 yards and 3 touchdowns last year. They are looking like they're going to be starting Jalen Holston. He rushed for 200 yards and a touchdown last year, caught 4 passes for 32 yards and a touch. Keyshawn King is the main backup for now. 117 yards and a touchdown, 2 catches, 52 yards and a touchdown last year. Both of those guys, I think, are certainly interesting. Looking at it, Holston, he's probably 6'3", just an okay play, but knowing Malachi's not there, he's going to definitely get, plenty of carries. And then Keyshawn King at 4'2", he's going to have to probably be a little more efficient with his touches since he won't get as many. But I do think he's certainly in play and viable as a 4'2" value play. There are some other guys on this slate that are relatively cheap that we don't necessarily have to go there if we don't want to, but I definitely think it's worth considering. At wide receiver for Virginia Tech, we are looking at currently on the depth chart I've seen, Stephen Gosnell, North Carolina transfer, played there for 2 years, didn't really do much. 2 catches for 11 yards in those 2 years. Just too much talent above him. Not a chance for him to play. Looking for a fresh start, staying in the ACC. So obviously he has the talent. We'll see what he brings to the table. DeJuan Lofton, who had 13 targets last year, 7 catches, 98 yards, and a touchdown. Those are your 2 main starters. It is worth noting that Jadon Blue is not starting, the Temple transfer. Blue has, he's been in DFS for a while. It was 4 total years at Temple, but it felt longer. I remember using him, all the time in 2019. Pretty much a big-time producer. He kind of fizzled out the last year or two, but he did have 169 catches for 1,700 yards and 10 touchdowns during his time at Temple. And I did read, where the coaching staff said that even though he's not listed as the starter, it's not a big deal. They have plenty of packages for him. He's going to get a lot of work, and he's still going to play plenty. So don't be afraid of using Blue. He's 6'1". I know a lot of people will be like, I'm not really, sure about him not starting. Maybe Gosnell at 3.5 or Lofton at 4.8, and I just don't think that is a reason to potentially fade him. GPP mostly, yeah, sure, but he's, we know the talent. They're going to give him probably some carries. He's going to get plenty of opportunities to catch the football, and that talent is still there with him. He's definitely the most talented receiver in that room. And then at tight end, they have Nick Gallo, 14 catches, 130 yards on 21 targets last year. So that's Virginia Tech kind of in a nutshell there. I think they'll be somewhat decent this year, but I don't know. I don't really know what to expect from them in conference play. So instead, I'm looking at Old Dominion guys, and I definitely feel pretty good about them, even though the Virginia Tech defense looks like there's going to be times where it's strong. They are going to be without one of their running backs, their RB2, Elijah Davis, suspended due to violation of team rules. Rushed for 562 yards last year. As I mentioned, the team's second leading scorer, so that'll open up some things for guys like maybe Keshawn Wicks as the backup. But mainly their RB1, Blake Watson, should get the lion's share of the carry as a bell cow type of carrier in this actual game. Rushed for over 1,100 yards last year, 8 touchdowns, caught 10 passes for 55 yards and a touchdown. YPC on the ground of 5.2. Definitely a solid play. Price-wise, he's a guy that I think we can certainly look at. He's only 4K. To me, that screams he's probably going to be popular. It's an 8-game slate. It's a little more condensed than the one we just had today, where some of the ownership was spread out. But at 4K for a guy who's probably going to get 20-plus touches, and that might be a conservative number, he's definitely going to be popular. So 4K, yeah. At wide receiver, there are a lot of mispricing here as well. Zach Kuntz, the nice tight end they have, is only 3.6. Ali Jennings, who was their leading receiver last year, only 5K. They have some nice talent, and Jordan Bly and Javon Harvey, they're also going to be starting. Those guys are both near min price, so you can get some exposure here to this Old Dominion pass catching group for relatively nothing. Ali Jennings had 97 targets last year, caught 62 of those for over 1,000 yards and 5 touchdowns. Harvey was targeted 22 times, Bly 22 times. Kuntz, though, 112 targets, caught 73 of those, so a lot of those, not catchable balls, obviously. 692 yards, 5 touchdowns. So I'm really quite interested in playing, probably 2 pieces from this Old Dominion group here, with it being, Watson and probably Kuntz. I wonder what Jennings, ownership might be there at the 5K, but at 3.6 for a cheap pass catcher, and typically, we want to get the value at wide receiver where possible / tight end. That just makes a little bit too much sense for me. I know that Virginia Tech defense, like I said, it could be a game where they drag it out a little bit, but it just looks too good of a spot. Speaking of which, the total in this game, didn't do that at the beginning, 47.5, so second lowest on the slate. Virginia Tech is favorited 6.5 points, with ODU being the hometown team. So maybe that'll keep people off of it because of the total. I know a lot of people go and look at the totals and make their determinations based off of that, but this is one we don't want to ignore. Moving on to the next game here, Western Michigan versus Michigan State. 54 total. Michigan State is 21-point favorites. That's actually gone down a little bit since I talked about it last. I liked it at 23. I obviously like it at 21. I think Michigan State should handle business here. even though that line's gone down. I just think this Western Michigan team, outside of their running game, is going to struggle a little bit. Speaking of which, they're running at quarterback a redshirt freshman named Jack Salopek. Not a lot to say about him. It's always tough coming into, really one of your first starts and having to go to a hostile territory like Michigan State. Not that the Spartans' defense was anything good last year. As you know, we could pick on them often in multiple positions. Maybe he'll end up okay, but I don't think I'm going to be wasting any time there at the QB spots on a guy like him. 6'3", it's not as if we're getting some super discount or anything. There's other QBs on the slate that are actually cheaper and in better spots, so I'd be looking at them. At the running back spots, they got Sean Tyler and Ladarius Jefferson back. That's a very powerful duo. Sean Tyler, somebody during, Maction that we're constantly rostering each and every week. Rushed for over 1,100 yards, 9 touchdowns, caught 14 passes for 114 yards and 2 touchdowns. Just a really strong fantasy option for this team. And he, it felt like he caught a lot more balls than just 14 last year, but he had a couple of games where he was catching like 3 or 4 passes late into the game. And it was like 2 times in a row, actually, when they were losing, and he was just catching all this PPR work to get some late fantasy points, which was great. But I think his PPR number and his receiving number is going to go up a lot more this year with the wide receiver crew being kind of mediocre now. Ladarius Jefferson rushed for over 800 yards, 10 touchdowns. Not much of a pass catcher, only 3 for 38. But those are your 2 main guys when you're looking at the Broncos roster. At wide receiver, they do return Corey Crooms, who was the WR2 last year behind Sky Moore. 76 targets, which is second on the team, 44 catches, 768 yards, and 6 touchdowns. So he will be the main guy that Jack Salopek will be able to throw to. Crooms is definitely probably going to have a pretty solid year. He's priced at 6'4", which is about where he should be. The Eastern Michigan guys who I'm going to talk about here, I would much rather play over him for cheaper, some a little higher, which will make him kind of a lower-owned GPP option, as they'll have to throw the ball going against a Michigan State team. And if there's, secondary and their defense as a whole is as bad as last year, then he should be able to do some damage. They also bring aboard Boston College transfer Jelani Galloway. In 10 games with them through 2 years, 18 catches, 215 yards, 2 touchdowns. Not really looking there. And then A.J. Abbott is looking like their other starter at the receiver spot. Only 3 catches during his time with Wisconsin before transferring over. Really, if you're looking to play anyone, it's Sean Tyler and Ladarius Jefferson. Michigan State Spartans, Peyton Thorne is back. Threw for over 3,200 yards last year, 27 touchdowns to 10 interceptions. Rushed for almost 200 yards and 4 scores. I do think looking at this particular slate and the quarterback position, it is rather weak. I mean, we're looking at the Kansas QBs, Jalen Daniels, who will probably do well in that game at 9-4, which is super disgusting to even consider, and we might have to. Instead, and it sucks that we won't have Reynolds from Charlotte because he's our guy, but you just go down there to 8-1, see Peyton Thorne and probably plug him in, and I think he's going to do just fine. So I'm definitely probably going to have a lot of him, and he's going to most likely go into my main lineup there at 8-1 just because I know he's going to be in a game where 3 touchdowns is still close enough to where he wouldn't get benched, so he should play the entire game, and I think he's going to be able to have, a strong 2 or 3 touchdown game because he has such good continuity with the returning receivers that he has. At running back, we're looking at Colorado transfer Jarek Broussard and Wisconsin transfer Jalen Berger. Berger was thought to be kind of the guy after, the next great Wisconsin running back, but he got chased out of town by Braylon Allen. We talked about that during the Big Ten show. During his time at Wisconsin, 389 yards, 3 touchdowns. So he'll get his work, but really I'm more interested to see where Jarek Broussard sits, after a couple of, he came on the scene and was a really just violent runner, racking up fantasy points. Then he kind of got hurt, and then he just was kind of poor. And since the injury, it looked like he didn't have the same burst that he had before. So I'm going to be really interested to see how he does. He did have almost 300 carries in 2 years with Colorado, so a lot of mileage for sure. Over 1,500 yards, though, 7 touchdowns, and a YPC just over 5.2 during his time there. So he's the one that I'm definitely the most excited to see. He's priced at 6-8, so we're not getting a discount compared to Jalen Berger, who's 4-9. You have the, RB3 there, Jordan Simmons at 4K kind of looming, but it's really going to be between those two, and it's Broussard that I'm going to be watching the closest. And then at receiver, Jalen Naylor and Connor Hayward are gone. That is approximately 110, 112 targets between the two of them just, walking out the door. We do return Jaden Reed, Peyton Thorne's favorite target, caught 59 passes for 1,026 yards, 10 touchdowns, was targeted a whopping 101 times. So that production, that continuity, that chemistry, that, rapport that he has with Peyton Thorne is definitely going to be something that I think we can lean on for fantasy. The other two returners that, people will know, Trey Mosley, 49 targets, 35 catches, 530 yards, 3 touchdowns. And then Montorie Foster, 12 catches, 164 yards, and a touchdown on 21 targets. You might recall midseason, he had that weird week where he was like super chalky and we just didn't really know why, didn't do anything, and then life moved on. I do want to keep an eye on Keon Coleman, who is a sophomore, didn't do, much of anything, was targeted 9-10 times last year. Stats that he put up were 7 catches, 50 yards, and a touchdown. But he has had such a massive spring and summer camp, and the coaching staff seems to be so enamored with him. There's talk that he could potentially challenge Jaden Reed this year for the target lead, depending how things, if he gets there quick enough, which is kind of, sounds like coach speak to me or a little bit overzealous. But at the very least, it sounds like he's going to, pip against, pass Foster and maybe even challenge Mosley and take that WR2 role. So they're very excited about him. It sounds like he's a guy that they're going to get involved. And it's something that I want to pay attention to. He's priced at 4.6. Mosley 5.9, Foster 3.9. So we're not getting a huge discount with him by any means, but he's one of those guys that, like I said, I just want to throw that name out there. That way, if there comes a time where, I say, hey, it's time to play Keon Coleman, we know why, we're ready to go. Or, he has that game where he just caught 5 for 50 and a touchdown, and it's just like pre-breakout. I don't want to miss it. So Keon Coleman, we're going to keep an eye out for him. Moving on to the next game, and this is one that I am relatively excited about, and I think the industry will be as well. Doing this long enough, you get a pretty good sense of ownership. Like I said, when I write my article, I get the show notes ready. I try not to look around at other people's stuff or listen to shows until afterwards, so I don't get swayed. I do start to look at ownership projections from, a couple of sites that post those. So you kind of get an idea, and you're able to flesh out how a slate might look in terms of ownership. And I do think this is going to be one that we see quite a bit of. Eastern Michigan was a team last year in Maction that just, you could play any of their receivers and typically get a pretty nice return, and you could stack them often. And sometimes you could stack them without their quarterback. And I know that makes no sense, but just the erratic quarterback play at times kind of hurt him. But the receivers, because there was only 2 or 3 of them getting fed, ended up working out just fine depending on the price. So we will start with EKU though. This game here, we have Eastern Michigan as a 13.5 point favorite, which is interesting. Keeps it close. EKU has the talent to keep it close. Total at 58.5, which is actually the second highest behind TCU in Colorado at 59. And this is on the DraftKings Sportsbook. Parker McKinney is the quarterback for EKU coming back. Last year, he threw for 2,400 yards, 18 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions. Where a lot of his value comes from is the fact that he rushed for almost 600 yards and 6 more touchdowns. So dual threat guy, Parker McKinney, somebody who could maybe come off as a little bit of a sneakier option where people will just, without digging in too deep, just look at him and say, oh, I don't need to play the quarterback for EKU. He's only 5'6", definitely interested. I think he is, a much better play than any of the Virginia Tech quarterbacks, personally. I think that, Hayden Wolf for Old Dominion, who I didn't really talk about at 5'1", he's better play than him. Jack Salopek at 6'3", like these are all guys that would not be better than Parker McKinney for me. The only one that I would play before him at the moment of the 2 games I've talked about is actually Peyton Thorne. So I have a lot of interest in him, especially with his rushing upside. I don't think the Eastern Michigan guys are going to be a lockdown elite unit. I do think they'll be one of the better defenses in the MAC when it's all said and done, but it's not enough to scare me off here in this spot. They are going to be without their leading rusher from last year, DeJuan Hewitt. some sort of injury he suffered. I didn't see a lot of what it was, but I do know he is out for the year. So no DeJuan Hewitt, the receiving leader from last year, Matt Wilcox, he's gone, moved on, out of eligibility. And they will be running Braden Sloan as the primary starter. Only 40 yards and a touchdown last year because Hewitt got the bulk of the work, but it does look like Sloan is going to be the starter and get that workload. Now, he is priced at 4.2, so we have another cheap running back at our disposal that we can potentially use. With McKinney being such a high volume rusher as a QB, a dual threat QB, it doesn't make Sloan, a must play by any means. We know Blake Watson at 4K is going to be a popular option, so Sloan might end up being kind of that GPP pivot for a couple hundred more. But he's definitely going to get looks and touches. Excuse me. At wide receiver, they do have some familiar faces. Their main returners, Jaden Higgins, 29 catches, 394 yards, 3 touchdowns, and Jaden Smith, the Jaden Show, 37 catches, 377 yards, 3 touchdowns. Now, they do have Cornelius McCoy, and if that name sounds familiar, good, it should, because Georgia State was where he used to play. You remember the Fun Belt slates that they were on. He was a very productive member of that team for a long time, and then last year just fizzled out, didn't work out, and ended up transferring. And now he ends up at Eastern Kentucky. Throughout his career, 148 yards, over 1,800 yards, and 10 touchdowns, and that was in about 3.5 seasons because he didn't play a full season last year. So Corny McCoy, I think he's a really intriguing option for GPPs. He's only 5'1" on DraftKings. The Jadens are both under 4K, so people might look there instead. But Corny McCoy is a big-time receiver, and if McKinney, has got it going on and can make the throws, I think Corny can definitely do some damage here at relatively low ownership, below 5%, because I just don't think people are going to go there. So that's my sneak GPP guy for this particular game. Going over to EMU, this is where we're going to want quite a bit of exposure. At quarterback, they're rolling the Troy grad transfer, Taylor Powell. It's basically a statue, so he's not a super exciting player. He's not going to run or anything, but he threw for over 1,200 yards in approximately 6 to 8 appearances, 7 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Definitely a guy that's just, he's going to get that volume, that passing volume to these great receivers that he has in Tanner Canute, Dylan Drummond, and Hassan Beydoun. And even the tight end Gunnar Oaks has had his moment. So it's a really strong group of pass catchers that they're going to be able to use. And Powell, I think, is going to be a guy that you can definitely look at, and he's in the player pool for a main team at the quarterback position. 7.5, the price is, getting up there close to Peyton Thorne. Would I rather play Thorne? I think so, but I just think that passing volume and the EKU defense is not going to do anything to really stop Taylor Powell. So as long as he makes the throws that he should and targets the right guys and doesn't make mistakes, I think he'll do just fine. Now, Taylor Powell also spent time at Missouri, so he has experience and all those stops. As I mentioned, he's basically a statue. He has 1 rushing touchdown, and I'm actually pretty sure, I don't have it pulled up, that he's in the negative for his career in rushing yards. So obviously taking a bunch of sacks when he was at Missouri. At running back, you have Samson Evans, who may not be the most exciting guy in the world, 316 yards last year, but he had 13 touchdowns. So his touchdown equity within this offense is massive. You may remember that they'd get down, anytime below inside the 5-yard line, it was basically Samson, the old half-baked. Those of you seen half-baked, bitch, I want to talk to Samson. It's basically the play they call there for Samson Evans. So I think his touchdown equity is going to continue to be pretty high. He's worth a look just on that, probably alone. Not a great play because the yardage won't be there, but if he's had games where he scores 3 touchdowns. Darius Boone is back as well. It does look like Boone's been pushed to the RB3 at the moment. 451 yards, 6 touchdowns last year. He's actually the yardage leader for returning players at the running back position. And then a Lamar transfer by the name of Jalon Jackson is the RB2 at the moment. 309 yards, 2 touchdowns, 11 catches for 115 yards. So it'll be a logjam at running back. They typically play multiple. They'll all get touches. It's just that Evans is going to be that goal line guy because he's a bowling ball. So it typically takes the value away from the other running backs. And I'm not really that interested there. If I'm going to target Eastern Michigan, and I'm going to be going hard on the pass catchers. That starts with Tanner Canoe, who is the cheapest of the three. He was only able to play in 5 games last year, myriad of issues, injuries, ailments, whatever you want to call it. But he was targeted 41 times in those 5 games, caught 34, 363 yards, and a touchdown. So the touchdown equity wasn't there for him, but he was a reliable PPR option that continually got the ball, and sometimes 3-4 times in a row. He's only 5K. That should make him a pretty obvious play when you consider that Baydoun, who's an amazing talent in his own right, is almost 8K, and Dylan Drummond, who is a very sure-handed receiver himself, is priced at 6.6. So people know that going cheap at wide receiver is kind of the early season move. That's the typical optimal way to play. So Tanner Canoe is the guy that you want to get into your main build. Very obvious. Hassan Badoun, I certainly like him. Targeted 126 times last year, 95 catches, 988 yards, 4 touchdowns. And Dylan Drummond, 65 catches, 716 yards, 6 touchdowns on 103 targets. I'm certainly going to be running some alt lineups that has 2 of them in that build. I'm going to be rotating through them. Tanner Canoe is your main team option, but get exposure to the other 2. And then at tight end, Gunnar Oaks caught 11 of his 14 targets for 126 yards and a touchdown. I do think we'll see more of him this season as well, and maybe he gets up closer to 350, 400 yards, something like that. But I do believe that, and I'm sure once I get up and look at the, start talking to people, that they're going to be on Eastern Michigan as well. I don't think you necessarily have to play Powell if you don't want to. I don't think it's a necessity to pair him up. In fact, we got away without, pairing up Eastern Michigan quarterbacks last year with, the various pass catchers. I know that goes against everything, stacking rules for football, but you saw games where Preston Hutchinson was in. He fell out of favor really quick after having a nice season before that. And then Ben Bryant, who ended up throwing for over 3,000 yards last year, but only 14 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. So you'll see, there's going to be situations where these guys get, 100 yards plus in the bonus for us, but maybe they're not returning too many touchdowns. And if that's the case, Powell might throw for, 299 yards, but if he gets 1 touchdown, then it's really not going to be that great of a play. Meanwhile, the receivers, each caught 100 and boom, they're at value. So that's where you want to think of this offense, because I don't think that Powell is going to be necessarily a better player than Ben Bryant. Ben Bryant completed almost 70% of his passes last year, just didn't have that touchdown, equity. And once they got in the red zone goal line area, they gave it to Samson Evans, who literally had 50% of the team's touchdowns. All right, so moving on from that game, which is definitely the fantasy juice. We have William and Mary, the Tribe, versus Charlotte. I do show Charlotte as a very light favorite, roughly, was it 7 points, which is kind of surprising and it, initially, but then you kind of go dig in a little more and you realize, why that is. So that might change the other books. That wasn't the DK Sports book that I pulled that from, so I don't know how reputable it was. I did have a total of 53.5. Obviously, our man Chris Reynolds is out. Really bad injury. They tried to get him back in, and it just wasn't working. I was pretty high on that Charlotte +7 number, and it was looking good. He threw a long touchdown to DeBose really early in that game, and it looked like they were going to be well on their way to winning outright, or definitely covering. And then, of course, the early second quarter injury happens, and they just fell apart and never got cooking again. So some betting opportunities here. Starting with William and Mary, I don't have a ton to say about their quarterback or wide receivers, but I do think there is something to be said about potentially looking at their running backs. And they have 2 that are going to split in Bronson Yoder and Donovan Lester. Yoder rushed for 622 yards and 4 touchdowns last year, carried a YPC of 5.5. Lester, 519 yards, 5 touchdowns, a YPC of 5.4. Very similar backs, but very productive backs that I definitely think can do some damage here against this Charlotte defense. Typically against Charlotte, you can look to terrorize their secondary. I just don't know that, the Tribe's quarterback, Hollis Mathis, who is only 4'6", by the way, really has the pedigree, talent, level of games, gamemanship to really kind of take advantage of that Charlotte defense. There will be times where we will be able to stack against Charlotte heavily, but I just don't know that that's here with the Tribe. So really looking at Yoder, who's only 3K. So again, another cheap running back that we have here. Lester is 5'2". Basically, they're going to get almost exact same workload. So you would just take the 3K Yoder. Wouldn't make sense to pay for Lester in that situation. And then at wide receiver, JT Mayo, they're at 3.8. Tyler Rose 3K, but nothing really to delve into and say definitively. It's just the running backs for Charlotte. Foster has been named the starter. They do have him priced up there at 7.7K, so we're not getting a discount on him. I do think he's a fine tournament play because I think people will kind of shy away from using him at that 7.7 price when you've got Thorne there, Powell, a couple of other guys who, are in decent situations, but just maybe a little more of a known entity, especially with Peyton Thorne. But this defense and William and Mary should be something that we should see them get pushed around, and I think Charlotte can definitely, assert themselves in this one. Looking at their game last week against Florida Atlantic when they lost 43-13, Foster came in and was pretty dreadful. He completed only 2 passes, 2 of 9 attempts, 21 yards, and he was picked off on one of those 9 attempts. Not great. He rushed 3 times for -8. So really just a terrible outing for James Foster, but he didn't expect to come in there. And it's a damn shame too, because Reynolds had almost 200 yards on 14 completions and 2 touchdowns and was well on his way, like I said. But Foster's got weapons, so the value of guys like Grant Dubose and Elijah Spencer and Victor Tucker obviously takes a big hit here with the poor quarterback play. I think Dubose is the one that takes the biggest hit because he really requires, timing and a quarterback that can, throw it with a little mustard. Did catch those 4 passes for 89 yards and 2 touchdowns, had the long touchdown last week. But I think maybe Victor Tucker is the one that will be least affected because he will come back and get some of the intermediate routes and rack up some of the PPR stuff. His touchdown equity has just really not been very good in this offense for the last 2 seasons, while Dubose has. So Tucker is the one that I think on DK where you're going to get those PPR points you can still consider. And I don't want to shy away from them just because of the poor quarterback play. There is a chance that they decide to lean on Chadrick Byrd. Calvin Camp I thought was going to be splitting with him. He only got 1 carry, and that may have just been because of the fact that they were down so big in that second half that they couldn't run the ball much. But I do have some interest in Chadrick Byrd if they decide to just, pound the ball down William and Mary's throat and allow Foster to just game manage instead of try to put the, game on his back where he makes a key mistake and all of a sudden we're talking about the Tribe pulling off a win and Charlotte's season going down the shitter. So I'm going to be interested to see where this ownership sits for Charlotte, guys. But on Chadrick Byrd, we're not getting a discount on him. He's almost 8K, but we have all this value at the other running back spots that we've talked about to this point that you can afford to pay that 7-8 for Byrd and assume that, he's going to get 20, 22 touches at minimum. Typically, we want to ignore the running backs in this offense, but it's a completely different situation with Reynolds out. Now at wide receiver, it's kind of swapped. So Dubose was the cheaper one on DraftKings, but it was Tucker cheaper on FanDuel. This week it's swapped. We have Tucker at 5.8, Grant Dubose at 7.4. So I am looking to take that discount with Tucker at 5.8. That's a very good price for him. Elijah Spencer, who we thought might push for more targets, kind of, suffered in that game. And I don't think he's worth talking about at this moment. I think there will be a time and a place to play Elijah Spencer, but as of right now, it's just Victor Tucker. It's just Grant Dubose. And I'm at this moment on DraftKings looking at Victor Tucker at that 5.8 price point. I'm really leery of Charlotte. And if the game ends up being close, you're going to want exposure to it, but it also could turn out to be like a 17-14 type of game. All right, moving on, we have Temple versus Duke. Duke 9.5-point favorite, a 51 over under. I don't have a lot of interest in this game, more so on the Temple side. This is a game between two more known, entities in an ACC squad in Temple and ACC squad and Duke. And I just don't like the Duke side. They're running Riley Leonard at quarterback, who played roughly 6 games last year, 381 yards, a touchdown and interception. There's talk around camp that he's better, whatever. At running back, it sounds like Jalen Coleman, who barely played, is going to get first crack, but they still have Waters out there. But at the end of the day, I think it's going to turn out to be a committee to fill those shoes left behind by Mateo Durant, and rushed for 1,300 yards last year. I don't think they have that runner on their roster right now, so it'll be interesting to see how that develops. But as of right now, it's kind of a fade. Wide receiver wise, we're looking at the only guy that doesn't have an OR tag next to him is Jalon Calhoun. Sorry, words. Calhoun, 72 targets, caught 56 of those, 712 yards, and 3 touchdowns. So he's the guy, if you really feel hell bent, like I gotta, you wake up tomorrow and you feel like I gotta have some Duke. You might wake up in the morning saying you got a Duke, but a different kind. But he's 6'5", so you really got to decide there, is 6'5" going to be worth it with a QB who, on paper just doesn't look very good. I would rather play somebody like an Eli Pankel or a Samir Hagans, but they like I said, they all have OR tags next to them. Eli and Darryl has an OR tag next with Darryl Harding, and then Samir Hagans has an OR tag with Jontavius Robertson. Now, Jontavius Robertson's actually kind of interesting, as he had 25 targets last year. Pankel had 32. Harding 18, and Hagans, under 10. It's just not a great team to target right now against this Temple team. I think this game, having it at 51 might be on the high side. I think we could see one played in the low 40s potentially between these two teams. And that just depends on if what kind of game DeJuan Mathis feels he wants to have, who we'll talk about in a second. At tight end, they're running Nicky Dalmolin, 15, 121, and 1 on 27 targets. Okay, so Temple side is where I'm looking. DeJuan Mathis is going to be our starter for Temple. 1,200 passing yards, 6 touchdowns to 4 interceptions in 7 games. Didn't start all of them, kind of in and out, and took over. Did rush for 82 yards and a touchdown. I do think we have some sneaky upside potential there for him to get some rushing yards. We didn't see it a lot last year because of the fact that he played in just the 7 games. But I think we're going to see a more refined DeJuan Mathis. I know that a lot of people have given up on him, and probably for good reason, but I'm not quite ready to there yet. And I want to still give him, 1 or 2 more opportunities to kind of come through and see what he can do as a quarterback with some decent weapons and hopefully what will turn out to be some good play calling for him. 6K, it's worth a look in GPP. I think he could definitely put up, 20 plus and pay off that 6K. And I don't want to fully ignore him. So he's in the GPP pool for me. Probably not a main team play just yet. At running back, their starter is Edward Sadie, 5'5" on DraftKings. Just kind of a solid play. Nothing really special. Did rush for over 300 yards last year and 3 touchdowns. Caught 14 passes for over 130 yards. Kind of just a guy. Now, if you're going the GPP route and you want to play Mathis, then you want to pair him with one of his targets. And the 3 main you want to look at are Jose Barbin, Ahmad Anderson, and Adonicus Sanders. Now, Ahmad Anderson is a former Purdue guy. He's been with Temple now this is the 2nd season. Relatively decent at Purdue. Had an okay year last year, 24 catches for 283 yards and 2 touchdowns. Barbone had 40 catches for 440 yards, 2 touchdowns. So he's the guy to really kind of look at as maybe making that next step this year. And then Adonicus Sanders is a transfer from Georgia Tech. He spent 3 years there. During that time, he racked up 65 catches for 834 yards and 4 touchdowns. So he is actually the guy that I think it would be smart for Mathis to hopefully have built chemistry with and really rely on. He's only 3.7K. Barbon, who has the best stats from last year, DK went ahead and just made him 5'5", which kind of removes him from the conversation, truthfully. And then you have Ahmad Anderson there at 4'6", which is also not a great price. So if you're going to want to pair anyone with Mathis, I think it's Adonicus Sanders because he does have big play ability. He can stretch the field a little bit, and he's really suffered from poor quarterback play during his time at Georgia Tech. Not that it's going to get so much better with DeJuan Mathis, but I think, Georgia Tech had quite a few pass catchers that just kind of cannibalized each other. Now he has less mouths to feed around him and should definitely produce. So 3.7 is a price that I think brings him to the conversation of being in your main team player pool. Will he actually make my main team? Probably not, because we have such cheap running backs, but I think he's worth talking about. All right, let's see what's going on here. I haven't paid attention, but I see Wes says JT Daniels is ass cheek, so that must mean my prop went down the tubes. So that's not ideal. So great. Well, I'll recap that on tomorrow's show too. I'll be recapping stuff as well. Yeah, that's great. JT Daniels. I'm sure that prop went down the tubes. That's okay. Well, I'm in the mud with you guys, so sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Let's see. Kansas, the next game here. Again, that's got me all pissed off now. Tilt. Tennessee Tech versus Kansas. Kansas minus 29, total of 55. So the Jayhawks quarterbacks are extremely expensive on this slate to an uncomfortable level. But the thing is, it's Jalen Daniels who's getting to start, not Jason Bean. And Daniels is 9.4, which is just a really terrifying price to consider paying for a Kansas quarterback. But he is facing a team that he could crush. He does have some rushing ability. He did finish the year, the last 3 or 4 games, as the Kansas starter, and Kansas actually looked improved with him under center. Being not a great passer, really good rusher, had over 400 yards, 2 touchdowns on the ground, but they needed him to be a passer as well, and I think that's why Daniels is going to start us off here. So I'm conflicted in the that I'm curious what he ends up being owned, but 9.4 for Jalen Daniels just feels so incredibly gross that I'm not sure I can pull the trigger there. I think it's still Thorne and McKinney for me, or Thorne and Powell. I think I'm really zoning in on those 3 guys, and I'm gonna have to choose 2 of those for my main lineup. I just don't know that Daniels can make it there. I don't know why they had to go and make him 9.4, but I don't appreciate that. He did finish with 860 yards, 7 touchdowns to 3 interceptions last year, 83 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns. So again, he has some rushing upside, not the same as Bean, but it exists. At running back, they are going to roll Devin Neal, 707 yards, 8 touchdowns, 7 catches for 57 yards and a touchdown. And then the backups fighting for that RB2 role all have OR tags. That's Daniel Hishaw, who didn't play at all last year, but in 2020 was their second leading rusher with 230 yards and 2 touchdowns. Kai Thomas, who transferred from Minnesota. You may remember Thomas, that Minnesota backfield between Mo Ibrahim and Trey Potts, all these injuries racking up, and he came in there and did some stuff next to Marquise Irving. He rushed for over 820 yards and 6 touchdowns. And then Savion Morrison, who was a Nebraska transfer, played 6 games for them, 116 yards and 3 touchdowns. So all 3 have OR tags. I believe all 3 will get time to kind of, try to carve out a role and get that RB2 spot behind Devin Neal. I don't think Devin Neal is the type of guy that's just going to be geared up and keyed up to the point where he's going to be rushing, 25 times a game. I just don't see that. I am really interested in Kai Thomas. I just wish there wasn't that OR tag. The OR tag makes me feel pretty uncomfortable. Now, Devin Neal is almost $9K. So you've got 2 Kansas players that are just priced way, way, way too high for my comfort level. If we think it's going to turn into a blowout, it's tough to trust Kansas for anything, but that would make sense for Savion Morrison or Kai Thomas to kind of get that second half carries. And they're both priced cheap enough that I think they're worth some GPP shots for sure. At wide receiver, your 3 starters are Luke Grimm, Quentin Skinner, and Lawrence Arnold. Luke Grimm is priced at 8.4, so he's off the table. Lawrence Arnold 6.3, a little closer, probably not that great, and Quentin Skinner at 5.3. Looking at it statistically speaking, Luke Grimm had 31 targets last year, caught 22 of them for 349 yards and 3 touchdowns. Lawrence Arnold, 48 targets, caught 27 of those for 316 and 3, and Quentin Skinner barely played. They are replacing Kwame Lassiter, who's gone. He had almost 80 targets last year. So somebody from that group of 3 is going to step out. But my God, can you imagine paying $8K, $9K for anyone from Kansas? I don't care if they're playing my son's JV team. There's just no way I can get down with that. At tight end, Mason Fairchild, 15 targets, 13 catches, 128 yards, and a touchdown. So Kansas, I don't know, man. I don't know. I want to look at the other side instead. Tennessee Tech. There is one player in particular that I'm looking at, and that's their RB1, David Geist. And he's also priced relatively cheap at 4-1. So we have another, we could do the 4 running back thing on this slate and not even use all of our salary. I may just have to throw a GBP lineup out there to see, because there are 4 to 5 running backs on this slate that are all priced under 5K, under 6K, that have major viability. He's their bell cow. He's their guy. Rushed for over 900 yards last year. 8 touchdowns, YPC just a tick under 5. He's also a pretty productive pass catcher, 37 catches for 220 yards and a touchdown. So I'm looking at him definitely against Kansas. That Kansas, all we're hearing about is Kansas has improved on offense. Kansas has improved on special teams. Kansas has improved on defense. They had some, upset wins last year, and Kansas isn't as bad as people say they are. And I truly believe, yes, they're not as bad as people say they are, but I'm not sitting here ready to say, oh my God, I can't target against Kansas with a guy like David Geist, because they're going to shut him down. I just don't buy into that. I'm not there yet with Kansas. So I'm looking at him. They are running Jeremiah Oatsval at quarterback, former Austin Peay player, threw for over 2,300 yards, 23 touchdowns, and 16 interceptions in 3 seasons. Willie Miller was their quarterback, but it appears he's moved to wide receiver now. So some weirdness there, some reverse Plumlee action, but really for Tennessee Tech, I think David Gist is worth considering for your main team. So we'll have to create a priority list, and I am working on that in my piece that will drop relatively early, before noon tomorrow, noon Pacific, I should say, where I'll kind of list the running backs in priority order, so you can kind of approach it from that regard. Next game, Illinois versus Indy. I'm scared to look at the comments. $214 yards. Yeah, that's a bummer. I knew it was going to be bad because the first quarter he had 50. He had a nice pass to Wheaton really early, and I thought that might work out. But, yeah. I got all excited about the Graham Harrell train, and apparently didn't work out. Like same old West Virginia, I guess. All right, so Illinois versus Indiana. It is down to a 1.5 point line on DraftKings at this very moment. Indiana is a 1.5 point favorite, a total of 46, which is the lowest on the slate. Now, if you watched the show last night, I told you to run, not walk for Illinois +3. Because I felt like it was going to become a pick'em, or, that line was going down for sure. And this morning when I woke up, it was already the 2.5, and now we're looking at 1.5. I suspect tomorrow before the game starts, we'll see that shift to, a pick'em or maybe 1. So hopefully you got it. If you didn't, I'm sorry. Indiana's bad. This is going to be a really rough Indiana team. I don't care that, they're at home or whatever, and trusting Illinois and Coach Blima is obviously very tough. But this Illinois team, when I say they're bad, I mean they're excruciatingly bad. A couple years ago, when they had my guy Michael Penix, who now plays for my Huskies, they had some weapons with Freifogel and Hendershot and Miles Marshall. They had some really good targets. They had some good fantasy goodness, but they really don't. Looking at it, everybody said they were going with Jack Tuttle at quarterback. Now it sounds like our old friend Connor Baslick from the Missouri transfer is now going to be edging Tuttle out. So we'll see where that stands. It's such a close battle, and if they're at the 11th hour like this, still trying to decide, that tells me they're both going to play. Obviously, that's an easy fade of both. I'm not going to be looking to play any quarterback from Indiana for a long time. Not at all this year. Basilik's only 5.2, which is an interesting price, but it doesn't matter. He could be, 4.2, and I still wouldn't want to play him because I think Tuttle's going to come in and split with him. So we're probably going to walk away from that. Looking at running back, it's really not that great, but last year wasn't very good either, so it may actually be an upgrade somehow. This is a team that has to run the football to be successful. They are bringing in a couple of transfers, or they have brought in Sean Shivers from Auburn, Josh Henderson from North Carolina. Those are the two guys that are probably going to split, at least initially. Shivers had over 1,000 yards with Auburn, 5.2 YPC, which is solid, and roughly 8 or 9 touchdowns during his time there, 3.5, 4 seasons. He's pretty small. He's like 5'7", 180 pounds, but, he's a quick guy, so that they'll be able to use him as kind of like the lightning, with Henderson being kind of the heavier guy over 220 pounds, who maybe is the more physical option. As far as DFS goes, I'm really trying to pretty this up for you guys, but it's not working. I don't think either makes too much sense in the grand scheme of things for DFS purposes. Now, they're going to want to establish the run because they don't want to, rely on Jack Tuttle or Connor Basilik's arm. So Shivers, who's there at 4.6, or Henderson 3.2, will get some volume, but I don't think they're going to churn out too much against this Illinois team. And I think that they'll be able to kind of stack up the box a little bit and dare guys like Jack Tuttle to throw to, his receiver group that includes Javon Swinton and Cam Camper and, DJ Matthews. So I guess I shouldn't talk too much trash about DJ Matthews. He's okay. Emery Simmons. But this is just a really ugly group, and I really don't see much to like. DJ Matthews, who's going to play in the slot, that kind of makes him interesting because he's going to get, those short yardage, PPR work. They're probably going to look to him a lot, but he's priced up around 5.4, which doesn't really do it for me. I've been seeing some hype from the Hoosier community about Javon Swinton, but I'm just really not too sure. 15 catches for 115 yards and a touchdown last year. He's actually the leading receiver in terms of yardage with that, which is really scary. I am interested to see Emery Simmons, another North Carolina transfer. They did bring in another guy, Anderson Kobe, who was a Tennessee transfer. And then former quarterback Donovan McCulley, who is actually going to be playing some wide receiver as well. So things got so bad in the wide receiver area that they're going to try to use an athlete like McCulley. So Emery Simmons is really the guy, like I said, I'd be most interested in. Peyton Hendershot is gone at tight end, so they don't have a lot there. But the Illinois side is definitely something that we can get behind and really exploit. Chase Brown, 5.4K, which is a ludicrous broken price. Very upsetting to see because it's an 8-game slate. He's going to be in cash, high dollar, 80% owned, maybe even 90 in some of these games because that's a broken price. He should have been like 9K after last week, right? So, it's nice because, I had to, wear it a little bit because I was scared. They said Chase Brown was going to be the stud last year and they played 5 backs and I had Chase Brown, thankfully, in my main, but I had way under the field and 19 carries for 151 yards, 2 touchdowns, very involved in the passing game, 3 catches for 16 and a touchdown. There's really no reason not to load up on him. They did give Josh McCray 8 carries. They gave Chase Hayden 7. Reggie Love got 3 and a touchdown. So they are still playing those guys, but clearly they're looking to give Brown the ball more. And if he's going to, contribute in the passing game more this season, then he's absolutely a no-brainer going up against this Indiana team here, this particular slate. Juice Williams had 7 catches for 26 yards, got banged up in that one. So we'll have to see how that shakes out. But I don't really want to be still, even though I like Illinois to win this game, it's not as if I'm going to sit here and be stacking them up by any means. So I'm really going Chase Brown, and then I'm probably moving on. Tommy DeVito is only 5.3, which is an interesting price for him. I think he's viable and borderline usable there but the thing is, his upside's not really there, and I would never use him in my main lineup, so I'm not even sure I can call him a GPP type of play. Now, there are some other guys at wide receiver to potentially look at that have some appeal. Pat Bryant looked pretty good, 344-1. Brian Hightower brought in 4 of his targets for 32 yards. So Casey Washington, 3 for 28. There's some guys here, and you can cycle through for some GPP stuff. Since it's kind of a smaller slate, there's not a lot of options. But at the end of the day, it's going to roll back to playing Chase Brown. Moving on, we have TCU versus Colorado, the final game. We're, just over an hour, short slate. We're whipping through it, going to talk prize picks, and then we'll banter. And then maybe live on air, I'll start looking at box scores and seeing what's what, if that's something that interests you guys. If you really want to see a mid-30s guy get pissed in real time, then stick around. No, I think we did okay tonight. TCU versus Colorado, 13.5 point favorite for TCU, total of 59. Highest on the slate, 59 is really not a lot, but this is the teams we're dealing with here. TCU's depth chart is quite frustrating, because I would say to you, the other 3 quarterbacks that I've really been harping on this slate, which again are Powell, Peyton Thorne, and Parker McKinney. Those 3 with Taylor Powell are kind of the guys I'm looking at, but I definitely want to play the TCU quarterback though. The problem is it is the hammer game. It's on an island by itself 2 hours after the Illinois game. It does sound like Max Duggan's going to get the job, but as of right now, the most current depth chart that I'm seeing floating around has an OR tag. It looks like Duggan is going to get it, but it looks like Chandler Morris is going to play. And for some reason, they love their QB3 as well, which he's been playing well, I guess. But damn, pick a quarterback and let's go. If it's going to be Hacksaw or it's going to be Morris. Like, I personally prefer Hacksaw because I think Chandler Morris will be super highly owned if it's him, but people for whatever reason don't ever respect Hacksaw, and I think he can do some damage against this Colorado squad. And he's priced $7K compared to the 7.6 of Morris. So I am leaning towards using him potentially, but I want to dig in more, do the message board thing, and see where people are, because if they're going to split or every other, it's just not worth it. At running back, Kendre Miller is the guy, but we're also seeing some OR tags at the various running back positions. He has an OR initially when it first came out with Amare DiMercato. At 7.5, we really need Miller to be the undisputed RB1, getting all the carries, doing the damage here. I was disappointed to see Imani Bailey kind of push towards the RB4 area. He's in an OR battle with Trent Battle. Battling with Battle, go figure. And it's kind of disappointing because I think, he left Louisiana with the thought that he's going to a better program and he's actually going to play. And to me, he's better than DiMercato, but he's young and they may be pitching him on the idea that he, chills this year and comes back next season and is their guy. Now, normally at 4.3, I might say, hey, let's take a GPP shot here, but we're not starved for value. There are 4 other running backs within $1,000 of him that are going to start or play a lot of snaps, get a lot of touches. So it doesn't make sense. The only thing we want to look at here is GPP shares of Kendre Miller. Now, what we can confidently do is go over to wide receiver. We have this value. We have cheapies at quarterback. We have cheapies at running back. We need to spend this money somewhere. We're going to do that with Quentin Johnson here at 8K because he's going to produce for TCU at a high level, regardless of who is at quarterback. He had games last year with both men, Hacksaw and Morris, and he produced with both. I am not worried about him in the slightest. I am very, very excited to use him. Do I want to pay 8K? Hell no. But like I said, I've got this salary. I got to use it somewhere. It's going to be him. 61 targets last year, caught 33 of those for 604 yards and 6 touchdowns. I am calling a 1,000-yard receiving season for Quentin Johnson. He's the guy. Other guys, and he's the only one that didn't have an OR tag at receiver as well. It's the only guy really doesn't have an OR tag at all in the whole offense. Tay Barber or Darius Davis, and then Savion Williams, and I believe he has an OR tag next to Jorquarius Spivey. So we're not really going to be looking to those guys probably too much. Tay Barber is actually pretty decent. He caught 30 passes, 499 yards, 2 touchdowns, 41 targets a season ago. Darius Davis, 36 catches, 520 yards, a touchdown on 52 targets. Savion Williams, 7 for 85 on 15 targets. And then Spivey just played 10 games, but he was mostly special teams, 3 catches for 9 yards on 3 targets. Damn. Why do I keep getting stuffed up on this? Tay Barber was a guy who's been productive throughout. He kind of started to lose his alpha role last year, but he has had 40-plus catches in all 4 years that he's been at TCU since 2008. 2018. He has 1,500 receiving yards, 121 catches, and 6 touchdowns. So we definitely don't want to sleep on Barber as a play, but he's 5'7". The pricing for DraftKings, please, I'm begging them not to do this year. Please fix this. College basketball last year was extremely broken for the first month of the season. If we're going to go into this with just silly prices, and we're going to see it on Saturday. I'm back tomorrow talking about South Carolina tight end Jaheim Bell, who I've been hyping to the moon, as everyone has. He's under 4K. He's going to be 90% owned on a huge slate. Don't like it, but that's where we're at right now. So, I guess I should go to Colorado, right? Don't have a ton of interest in the Colorado guys whatsoever. Familiar name they have at running back, Alex Fontenette. They're at 5'1". He's mainly the guy that you would want to use. They do return Brendan Lewis there at quarterback. He's only priced at 4.8, but he's generally been pretty heinous throughout. He's not somebody that I really want to use with this slate having, again, so much value. We don't have to go down there and try to put ourselves through a Brendan Lewis who in 12 games last year acted as a game manager, threw for 1,500 yards, 10 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, had some decent ones, rushed for 200 yards, 2 touchdowns. Fontenette rushed for 326 yards and 5 touchdowns, 13 catches, 80 yards and a touchdown. Really the most productive guy that returns for them. Daniel Arians is back, who caught 19 passes for 237 yards. And that's really just kind of it for Colorado guys. This is not a team that I'm very excited about. With Broussard gone, they don't have a lot. It's kind of sad because Colorado for many seasons was a very productive team that we could look at and feel pretty damn good about, but that just isn't the case. They also have Brady Russell back, though, if you care about that. 25 catches for 307 yards. Just shining it up for you, but really it's Quentin Johnson as our hammer play, and we're moving on, depending on how froggy, how risky you want to get at quarterback by gambling on one of the TCU guys. All right, so that wraps up the slate. If we're talking core, it's quite easy and I think relatively obvious. So for me, quarterback core is going to be Peyton Thorne. I may differ there from others, and that's fine if so. I think Powell is going to get, a decent chunk of ownership. I like McKinney quite a bit, but Thorne is just the guy that I would trust the most on this slate. At running back, the core play is Chase Brown. Very obvious, very easy. Just put him in there and move on. Everybody will have him. And then at wide receiver, that core play for me is going to be Tanner Canu, who's another, chalky type play. But I'm also very obviously going to be playing Quentin Johnson. So those 4 guys will be in my main lineup. Very obvious who else I like and where I'm going to go. There's just a few, 1v1s, maybe a 2v2 that I got to figure out. But with Kuntz being so cheap, that's probably another guy that I'm going to stuff into my build. All right. 5.4K for Chase Brown is nuts. You are absolutely right. Why does TC have 90 wide receivers listed? They did last year too, actually. And they have a bunch of, they're crazy about OR tags, so we'll see how that works out. But it really looks like Quentin Johnson and from what I've read, Savion Williams is safe in his snaps. But yeah, we have a lot of other things to figure out for this TCU team. They're having a tough time making a decision on who they want to actually start. So Quentin is really just that safety valve for us for that TCU exposure. All right, moving over to Prizepicks. Let's see what I like for Prizepicks. Man, there's been some really juicy numbers to start off here. Looking at passing yards, I really want to take that under 224.5 passing yard number for Grant Wells. He certainly has it in him, but again, from what I've read, has a very short leash, and if he falters at all against ODU early, I could see him being pulled for Brown. So I'm looking at the under. I know I usually don't hype unders, but under 224.5 passing yards for Grant Wells. I'm staring very hard at this Sean Tyler 65.5 rushing yard number. I do think Michigan State wins this game handily. And Tyler may end up having to just, catch the ball a ton, but 65.5 rushing yards for him is really low. Many games last season, he was up over 80 pretty consistently. And we know the Spartans defense in the past has been pretty sour. So over 65.5 rushing yards for Sean Tyler is one that I'm going to have to lock in, I think. That's just too juicy. They've got Chase Brown at 94.5. We have reached the level with him where I think you can probably safely take the over anytime he's under 100. You can just go ahead and slam that over 94.5. It's not the top play for me on Prizepicks today, but he's definitely going to be in play. As I mentioned before in the past, rushing yards are typically the most profitable stat category for me when it comes to Prizepicks or props in general. And that's just what I'm comfortable exploiting. And we're going to have these full slates coming up on Saturdays where we're going to be able to kind of rack up some profit and get that, credit over on Prizepicks up to a high number once we get some regular games here, which will be as early as Saturday. Reception yards, this one's a little tougher. I think the Zach Kuntz number at 49.5 is extremely interesting. They're trying to bait you into taking Ali Jennings at 64.5 because what kind of season he had last year. But to me, Kuntz over 50 is definitely a semi-lock. He's going to be an NFL draftee, and he's going to be a very heavily featured member of their offense. Quentin Johnson over 83.5 receiving yards. That might feel sort of high, but if he's going to get the 1,000 yards that I'm predicting for him, he's going to have to hit several games over 100, and this is one that I think he does it, even though playing at Colorado can sometimes be a shock for people at first when they try to breathe. Fantasy scores, if anything jumps out at me, there is that Blake Watson number of 14 fantasy points because I do think he's going to score some touchdowns. So I am leaning the over 14 there for him. Chase Brown over 16 fantasy points. He's going 20 plus. I think relatively easy. I don't think we have to worry about that one very much. Isaiah Williams sitting there at 11, depending on his health and status there. We may look at the under, but right now we're going to leave it alone. And then receptions. And actually going back to receiving yards, Jaden Reed 89.5 number looks pretty juicy as well. I think he has a chance to go over that. But there was a reception number here that I really liked. Let me get back to it. Quentin Johnson. Just playing the hell out of him, the 4.5 receptions. Actually envision him getting 7 to 8 in this game against Colorado. So I'm riding him, 8 catch, 120 yard game. These Prizepicks numbers for this particular game set, I'm not as confident in as I was week 0 and today's games, but I'm certainly feeling quite good about the numbers that I've provided. You definitely want to get over to FTN Daily. I do post my Prizepicks plays 3-pick, 4-pick, and 5-picks in the tracker. So if you're a part of our site, you can find those plays there. Same thing with the betting info. That's in the tracker as well. Kind of keeps us from doing the whole I played this thing. It holds us accountable because we actually put in the plays that we're doing. So those are the Prizepicks numbers that I'm looking at. Betting wise, I still like Illinois plus 1.5. If you didn't get the +3 last night with me, I like them to win outright. At this time, you should probably just take the money line and roll them because they're winning this game against Indiana and trusting Belima. Scary, but I think they're going to win this one. I like the potential of Kansas Tennessee Tech total to go over 55 if that Kansas defense is still as mediocre as over. That is the second bet that I'm really looking at. So Illinois outright at this point, Tennessee Tech, Kansas over 55. And then the Eastern Kentucky versus Eastern Michigan game, another total that I'm looking at over 58.5. I think that one's going to have a lot of offense. I think both teams are going to be able to score at will and put up some good numbers. So those are the three bets that I am looking at the most. Remember, back tomorrow night, 8:30, covering the Saturday main slate. If there's time, we'll kind of, give a core at least for the afternoon / late night slates. Potential for a co-host tomorrow, but might just be me rolling solo again, which feedback I'm getting you guys are fine with. And then I'll have the article out before noon East or noon Pacific for this Friday breakdown. Back Saturday morning for a Q&A session. That is just for you guys to join me at 8 in the morning Pacific time, and ask questions. Give me 2v2s, ask for, betting information, prize picks, has my thoughts changed, news updates, injury updates, depth chart updates, basically just anything you guys want from that show, ask and you shall receive. Appreciate it, the continued support. We got a really nice number of viewers last night and a really nice number of live viewers at the moment right now. So I appreciate that, guys. Best of luck. Hopefully you guys smashed. I know I mentioned if we finished early that I might peep out some stuff from today. I don't know if you guys are really interested. Let's see what we got going on here. Let's look at that West Virginia game. Let's see just how bad that was. (38-31). Hey, well, the 7.5. Great teams, cover, right? So we got that. We got that one right. Daniels 23-40 for 214 yards and 2 touchdowns. CJ Donaldson, wow. CJ Donaldson, 125 yards on 7 carries. All right. Okay. Wheaton, 9 for 97 and 2 touchdowns. So we got the Wheaton prop. We had him at 58.5 on our betting pool on Prizepicks as well. So we got the Wheaton play. We'll take that, right? Let's see what Slovis over 300. Okay. 2 touchdowns for Rodney Hammond. Israel Abankanada did nothing. Jared Wayne, Kanata Mumfield, 71 yards. He got his over, right? So we hit the Mumfield prop. We hit the Wheaton prop. Missed the JT Daniels. So 2 for 1 on the actual betting props that we submitted. Hey, we'll take that. That's still a profitable, evening there. My guy Kanata Mumfield with the 71 yards. Man, do I want to look at? Let's look at Tennessee because there's another one that I really wanted with Jalen Hyatt. So I know you guys already know. Let's see what they did here. 59-10, obvious win. Paddock 269, no rushing. Jason Jackson didn't do 5 for 65. It's just okay. Nothing doing there. Hendon Hooker 221 and 2 touchdowns. Joey Milton in the game for 113. Jalen Wright, Jabari Small, big bust. Ooh. Those that faded Hendon Hooker did not get the game they were wanting there. Hyatt 2 for 28. One of my biggest prize picks play was the over 40.5, but played myself with the blowout. So Hyatt didn't get there, but 228 and a touchdown. Seti Tillman 6 for 68. The Volunteers stack didn't work if you had it, but if you played Hyatt, you feel okay about that. And of course, Hendon Hooker with the 4 touchdowns that he accounted for. He'll have some bigger games as we go along. We'll be through these blowouts here in a couple of weeks, and we'll be able to start getting down to business. So I think that's it. I'm going to check out the other stuff here off the air. You guys don't want to see me talking about box scores, I'm sure. Appreciate it, guys. Thank you very much. Make sure you slam that like button and be back tomorrow night at 8:30 PST as I break down the Saturday main slate. Gosh, it's already Friday. Thanks, guys. See you.